Hey guys, this is the MMA Breakdown, back with predictions for UFC Fight Night 81, Dillashaw versus Cruz. Very excited for the main event. But before we get into the predictions, let me quickly recap what happened at UFC 195 as far as my picks go. But I was 624 for the event, 8 for 12, and obviously that was the first event of the year, so currently I'm sitting at 624. Picked Lawler. I scored the fight for Lawler. I know everyone is saying that Condit won, and it was, the way I see it, it was just super close, very competitive. I did score it for Lawler. I don't understand why people are calling it a robbery. I mean, the rounds in question were very close. The third is the one that everyone is really debating. I thought the fifth was actually really close, and Lawler was definitely losing, and I thought he stole it at the end with his, his barrage there at the end. But whoever you scored the fight for, it really just came down to how you scored either one or two really close competitive rounds. So I don't think it's a robbery at all. And if you say Condit won, if Condit would have won the fight, I would have been disappointed, but I couldn't argue with that at all. It was literally one of the closest fights I've seen in the UFC ever. But I am happy that Lawler won because I picked him, and I picked Miocic, Tumanov. Pretty happy that I picked Ortega by third-round submission. Trujillo, McDonald. Duffy disappointed me. I thought that fight was going to be a lot more competitive. I didn't expect Poirier to be able to dominate with the wrestling like that. And then I got Tanaka and got the first fight wrong, Westcott and Garcia. All right, and if you want to follow my progress more closely, I always post my predictions and my results from UFC Fantasy before and after each event on Twitter. So follow me on Twitter. My link is in the description. All right, let's flip the camera around and let's do the predictions. So UFC Fight Night 81, Dillashaw versus Cruz. Very excited for it. Great main event. Of course, you feel so bad for Cruz, being injured for almost 3 years straight now. He had his return, but then got injured again, and just really happy to see him get back in there and fighting for the title. I hope he can salvage what's left of his time in the sport, which has probably been cut short now with all the injuries, but hopefully he can still do some big things. Great top three fights on this card. I think they're better than the top three fights from 195, not after the fact, but just in terms of name value and anticipation, especially for a free card. I think this really rivals 195. Prelim card is still junk, but really looking forward to those top three fights. All right, starting off with the Fight Pass prelim card at light heavyweight, Francimar Barroso versus Abdul Karim Edilov. Not going to make a pick here. I don't know Edilov, who's debuting, and Barroso, this guy, I have no interest in seeing him fight in the UFC. I remember his debut fight back at UFC 163 versus Ednaldo Oliveira, and it made such an impression on me. It was just one of the lowest level fights you'll ever see in the UFC. Go back and watch it on your Fight Pass. It was horrible. And then he had another really unimpressive performance against Hans Stringer. Looked a little better against Ryan Jimmo last time out, but just not a guy worth talking about. Not looking forward to that one. Next up at bantamweight, Rob Font versus Joey Gomez. Another one where I won't be able to make a pick. Gomez debuting. Font, this guy hasn't fought in over a year and a half. July of 2014, and it's kind of disappointing actually because he had a really nice debut win over George Roop, a quick first round knockout. Seemed to be comfortable on the feet. He was moving around well and nailed Roop with a big shot. I don't think Roop is the best measuring stick, but it was a solid win over a vet. Big knockout win. Excited to see more of him. He looks like a good athlete, but without knowing anything about Gomez, can't make a pick there. Moving along at light heavyweight, Ilir Latifi versus Sean O'Connell. Sean O'Connell seems like a guy who's really making a lot out of the limited tools he has. He's a gritty, high-volume striker. Really liked his last one, his knockout over Anthony Perosh. Just got on him from the start through a lot of volume and quickly put him out. We've seen him gut it out in really tough fights that went the distance or went deep. Like his fight against Matt Van Buren, was losing very badly early, almost got finished himself, but came back to get the finish. And then I thought he won his second fight in the UFC against Villante. That was a close one. But a matchup like this, a high volume guy who is not very skilled against a guy who has a lot more technique, I got to go with the technical striker. I think Latifi is going to have a big advantage there on the feet. Just has a more varied attack, wider array of striking tools. And we've seen him fight on the ground. You got the submission over Cyril Diabate. We haven't seen O'Connell on the ground at all. O'Connell was knocked out in his debut by Ryan Jimmo. So I like O'Connell. He fights hard. He makes the few tools he has work, but Latifi I think is just more technical, more seasoned. I got to go with Latifi here to get the win, I think by stoppage. All right, next up at featherweight, Charles Rosa versus Jimmy Hettes. This should be a fun fight. Should be a fun grappling match. Hettes is a wizard on the ground. Has had some setbacks. Has been exposed on the feet a couple of times. His last fight against Diego Brandao stopped due to a cut, but looked like Brandao was getting the advantage on the ground and on the feet. But I think Hettes should be able to win this fight. Rosa is probably going to look to grapple, and he's not a bad grappler. He submitted Sean Soriano. He was able to get on top of Dennis Seaver, get some reversals in that fight, and his last fight against Yair Rodriguez, lost that fight maybe controversially, but was able to take him down and pound on him for a bit from top position. But if it hits the ground, I just see Hettes being the far more capable grappler. I don't think his wrestling is going to be able to dominate Hettes. You watch Hettes in his Rob Whiteford fight. He was struggling a bit on the feet. I think he actually lost that first round, but once it hit the ground, you see this guy just shines. Locked up the triangle quick and submitted Whiteford. So I have to go with Hettes. Rosa seems like a decent wrestler, not too great on the feet. I think it should be a stalemate on the feet, but once it hits the ground, Hettes should have a big advantage, and I think he gets a submission. So taking Hettes. All right, next up at lightweight, Paul Felder versus Darren Cruickshank. This is a good fight pass main event. Duffy versus Poirier, that should be on a main card. That's a pay-per-view worthy fight. If they want to, get the fans a little excited, tease us a bit with a fight pass main event, give us an exciting fight, this is the kind of fight that should be on there. Felder versus Cruickshank. I have no problem with this, but don't put a really high-level fight like Poirier and Duffy on the fight pass card again. Felder versus Cruickshank. Cruickshank, this guy has just become a really unpredictable, untrustworthy fighter. Every time it hits the ground, it just seems like he instantly loses and cannot compete there at all. The Dariush fight, Dariush was able to create a scramble as soon as it hit the ground, got himself submitted. And the last fight against James Krause, that one really surprised me because we hadn't seen Krause's submission game or wrestling game at all in the UFC. And it was the same thing. They got into kind of a weird scramble. Krause was able to get on his back and submitted him really early in the fight. So Cruickshank cannot beat guys who can take him to the ground, who can even create a scramble, who aren't just going to stand there and bang it out with him. But that is what Felder's going to do. We haven't seen a ground game from Felder, and I think he was a little exposed in his last fight. I think all of us have really overrated him after his knockout over Castillo, which was really impressive, and had a really competitive fight with Edson Barboza, but Ross Pearson was able to dominate him in the clinch, really slow the fight down, and you saw that Felder, despite being a really unorthodox striker and having some diverse tools, just didn't really have the fundamental striking to deal with Pearson or to have success in the clinch. So I'm going to take Cruickshank here. Cruickshank, despite his struggles on the ground, he has been able to mix things up a bit. The Njokuani fight uses wrestling to get the win. And when fights stay on the feet, he generally does well. Won a decision against Yves Edwards years back, and had a close fight with John Makdessi. Not a great technical striker when he's forced to fight at range. Even the KJ Noons fight, I thought he looked a little bit lost and wasn't able to get anything going there. But both guys have really unorthodox striking games and are probably going to just throw a bunch of heat at each other. But I'm going to go with Cruickshank. I think he mixes it up a bit, goes to the clinch, maybe tries to take it to the ground. I'm going to take Cruickshank for a decision. All right, next up, onto the Fox Sports 1 prelim card at featherweight, Maximo Blanco versus Luke Sanders. Another fight where I'm not going to be able to make a pick. Sanders, debuting fighter. Blanco, I think he's starting to put things together a little bit. Had a really quick knockout over Mike De La Torre in his last fight. Pretty impressive. And I thought he had a solid performance against Dan Hooker, where he kept a good pace, showed good pocket boxing, and threw a lot of volume in that fight. So I think he's been getting a little bit better. But he's definitely had his share of fights where he didn't look like he was fighting to the best of his ability. The Felipe Arantes fight, even the Sam Cecilia fight, Andy Ogle fight, he dropped around to Ogle, but I can't make a pick there. All right, next up, a light heavyweight, Tim Boetsch versus Ed Herman. This fight to me is really sad. Two guys who probably shouldn't be competing in the UFC anymore because they just can't. Boetsch, he's fought the better competition. I think he'll have a speed advantage against Herman, and he just has bigger knockout power. Ed Herman, his last several fights have just been really slow grinding fights where all he seems to be able to do is get guys in the clinch. The Hofffield-Natal fight, really bad. I actually thought he lost that fight. Got knocked out quick last time by Derek Brunson. Just hasn't really had a relevant win in the UFC since his win over Clifford Starks in 2012. Won a split decision over Trevor Smith, but that's it. I just think he looks old out there. He's slow and can't do much but get in a really sloppy brawl or try to push you up against the fence. And while Tim Boetsch has definitely been sliding, he can still make stuff happen. Was getting dominated by Brad Tavares, but pulled out the knockout late in that fight. Dan Henderson just creamed him in his last fight. But I think Boetsch should have the wrestling ability, should be stronger in the clinch. I don't think Herman will be able to, grind on him like he did to Natal, and Boetsch should have the power advantage as well. So I'm going to go with Boetsch here. All right, next up, a lightweight, Mirbek Taisumov versus Chris Wade. As impressed as I've been with Taisumov, and he's just clowned some guys, first round knockouts where he just looks like he's going out there and styling on a heavy bag. I think I have to take Wade here. Taisumov's last fight against Alan Patrick, that was good. He's struggling early, but made the adjustments, got the knockout. He has huge power. He's an unorthodox striker, super explosive. But if you think back to his fight with Michel Prazeres, where he was pretty much just shut down, Prazeres was able to take him down at will, and that really raised Prazeres' stock in my eyes. And we saw that Prazeres was not able to really be successful in the UFC after that. Just lost his most recent fight to Valmir Lazaro in a very underwhelming fashion. Taisumov was able to get exposed like that against a guy who hasn't proven to be very good. I think Wade, with his wrestling ability and his patience, and a guy who seems to be a pretty smart fighter. His fight against Christos Giagos wasn't a barn burner, but he's patient and did what he had to do to win the fight. Took his time on the feet and landed some good strikes there. Waited for his opportunities. I think Wade will be able to get the win here over Taisumov with his wrestling. Wade is not some superstar talent. He had a really close fight with the tough China guy that was cut, Zhang Li Peng. He had a really close fight with him that he could have lost. Wade could definitely lose, but I just think seems like a smart fighter. He's a strong guy. He's got wrestling, and Taisumov, he's been knocking people out who want to test their striking against him. So I got to go with Wade. Think he's going to win in the clinch and be able to win with wrestling. So Wade for the decision. All right, last Fox Sports 1 prelim fight. Welterweight Patrick Cote versus Ben Saunders. Weird fight to me. Patrick Cote, a guy I had kind of written off, back years ago when he lost to Alessio Sakara. Controversial knockout, but still, he totally fell apart in that fight. I thought his chin just looked like glass, but he's managed to, claw his way back with his most recent win against Josh Berkman. And we saw power that we haven't really seen from him before. Ben Saunders, I don't think he'll be able to compete on the feet with Cote. And if he gets it to the ground, I don't know. Ben Saunders wasn't able to submit Robertson. I actually thought Robertson won that fight. And he kind of put a stop to the whole mystique around Ben Saunders when he gets to the ground. He's got a good guard. He's got good rubber guard, but couldn't submit Robertson. Robertson was able to drop him in that fight. Cote should have the power advantage. Cote's shown a good top control game in recent years against Volker, and a great wrestling performance he put on against Noak. I'm gonna say Cote stays out of danger on the ground, nullifies the submission game of Saunders, and then on the feet he should just have a big advantage. So I'm taking Cote. I'll say for a decision win here. All right, next up onto the main card, also on Fox Sports 1. At lightweight, Ross Pearson versus Francisco Trinaldo. This is kind of a tough fight to call. Just, both of these guys are inconsistent. Ross Pearson, a guy that I was ready to write off, and, every time I seem to write him off, he comes back with an impressive win, just like he did in his last fight against Paul Felder. Ross Pearson was exposed badly on the ground against Evan Dunham, and Trinaldo, we know he's dangerous on the ground, and he's had fights where he just wrestles guys and stays on top of them. And Trinaldo's also a good kickboxer. He really came alive in his last fight against Chad Laprise. Didn't see that knockout coming at all, but blasted Laprise, put him down, and finished him off on the ground. That was impressive, but that isn't what we usually see from Trinaldo. Usually he gets into these really long fights where he fades in the end. The Norman Park fight, everyone thought Park won. and Trinaldo is definitely fading, and his striking game really kind of falls apart as the fight goes on. I just see Pearson being too technical. He should have the better footwork. He's the more methodical striker. Trinaldo might have a power advantage, but if he can't hurt Pearson in the first round, which is a possibility, and again, given Pearson's horrible performance against Dunham, I think Trinaldo definitely has a chance to out-grapple him, but if he can't hurt Pearson in that first round, I think Pearson pulls away in the later rounds. He should have the more technical kickboxing, but then again, Pearson does have a suspect chin. The Iaquinta knockout, and even going back to the Cole Miller knockout, even though he's a technical striker, not always the guy who will land on you first. So both guys are inconsistent. I'm going with Pearson. I don't see Trinaldo having enough in the tank late and being able to deal with Pearson's technical striking in the later rounds. So I'm going with Pearson for a decision. All right, next up at heavyweight, Travis Browne versus Matt Mitrione. This, to me, is a really great fight. Actually, I'm more excited for this than the co-main event. But I view this as a striker versus grappler matchup, and I really think it's as simple as that. If it stays on the feet, I think Mitrione has a big advantage. We've really seen him improve his striking game technically over the last few years. The fight against Derek Lewis, he was just looking so clean and crisp on the feet, switching his stances several times, throwing high kicks and big power. Just looked like he just grazed the chin of Derek Lewis, and he put him out cold. And Travis Browne, while he, he's kind of been dubbed the Dominic Cruz of the heavyweight division, while he has really good movement, has kind of developed his own kind of unorthodox style for heavyweight. He's made it work at times with the knockout wins over Overeem and Struve, those guys. He does not have the fundamental striking. Was really exposed not only in his last fight where he got just ran over by Arlovsky. Arlovsky just closed the distance, and it's just like Browne didn't have any capability to strike in the pocket at all. He's never been a combination striker. He's never shown a jab cross, anything like that. Everything is about movement and leaping in from the outside with big overhands. But not only in his last fight was he exposed, but the Verdum fight was just totally picked apart for 5 rounds. Hurt early, never came back. So if it stays on the feet, Mitrione, I think, has a big advantage there. I think he will put him out, fairly quickly. But Mitrione, on the other hand, is weak on the ground. His fight against Rothwell was doing just fine on the feet. Decided to take him down, got submitted. Brendan Schaub fight. That fight he got beat up on the feet too, but still was taken down and submitted. And what was the other fight? Czech Congo. Going back years, the guy struggles on the ground. So if Browne's able to take it there, I think he could submit or pound out Mitrione. But I'm gonna go with Mitrione here. The fight's got to start on the feet. I don't see Browne as being really a smart fighter. I think he likes to get into brawls and likes to test his striking against guys who are better than him there. Browne's never really proven to be a takedown guy. Once fights go to the ground, it's not usually because he is looking for takedowns. I'm gonna go with Mitrione here. I think he lights up Browne early, hurts him. Browne's got a bit of a suspect chin at this point, but watch out for that ground game. If Browne comes out smart, takes it to the ground, Mitrione should lose. But I'm going with Mitrione. I'll say first round knockout. All right, next I have a lightweight, Anthony Pettis versus Eddie Alvarez, the co-main event. If this was before Pettis' last fight, I'd say Pettis just creams him. Pettis has been super impressive against much better competition Ran through Cerrone, who beat Alvarez pretty easily in their fight. And if Eddie Alvarez, I think his game plan, didn't look good coming into the UFC fighting Cerrone. Just looked really flat. Couldn't get anything going with his striking other than uppercut flurry in the first round. And then his last fight against Gilbert Melendez, just resorted to going for the takedown, not even completing most of them, just grinding against the cage, stalling there. And that fight was controversial. That was, even with him just doing that, it was still a really close fight. And if he couldn't be more dominant against Melendez, I think he's going to have a tough time making that work against Pettis. Pettis has had his struggles. The RDA fight, RDA was just able to close the distance, get on him, get in on his legs and get the takedown. Melendez did the same thing, kind of laid the blueprint for that. And even Jeremy Stevens back in the day kind of tested him in the clinch, got some takedowns on him. So Pettis, we've seen him struggle there, but I have a feeling he's really motivated to redeem himself from that title loss. And on the feet, he should just have a huge advantage with the range striking, the kicks, the punches, all the unorthodox stuff. I have a feeling he's going to be a bit more conservative, fight safer, just given that tremendous beating he took against RDA. But Pettis just has too many skills, I think, for Alvarez to win here. And I think it's just unlikely that Alvarez just holds him up against the fence for all 3 rounds. So I'm going to go with Pettis. Like I said, he could definitely get a finish, but I think the decision's more likely. I think he's going to fight a little smarter here, but going with Pettis. All right, and then the main event for the bantamweight strap, Dillashaw versus Cruz. What an amazing title fight, and I think it's too bad that the UFC just jam-packed December full of events. And if UFC 195 didn't happen, I think this main event would have gotten a lot more push, a lot more media attention, and just more anticipation from fans. But Dillashaw versus Cruz. I think the big thing to consider here is that Dillashaw just is a more dangerous fighter. And I love Cruz. I think people, have grown fonder of him because of his absence, and maybe have forgotten that while he was an amazing fighter, super elite guy, he was never a dangerous fighter. And I'm pulling up his record here, and his last finish is over. Well, okay. Besides the Mitsugaki fight, his last finish before that was in 2010 against Brian Bowles, and before that against a no-name guy back in 2008. But after his in between his first and second WEC fight, Cruz is not a dangerous fighter. And yeah, he finished Mitsugaki in his last fight, but he even admitted that was him just kind of getting all of his rage out and just throwing everything he had at Mitsugaki, and that came off of a takedown. He pushed him up against the fence and just unloaded on him. I don't think he's going to have that approach against Dillashaw at all. I mean, he can't. Dillashaw is just too technical for that, and will make him pay for trying to unload the tank in the first round like that. So I don't think Cruz can hurt Dillashaw. I mean, this guy went 5 rounds with Scott Jorgensen and didn't do much to put him in trouble. And if you think back to the Demetrius Johnson fight, Cruz's last fight before his layoff, Johnson was making him uncomfortable on the feet. Go back and watch that fight. Johnson was getting the better of him, and Cruz really had to rely on his wrestling to get it to the ground to have success in that fight. And he did take the back, from what I remember. I think he was working a choke attempt a few times. But Dillashaw, he's a great scrambler, and I don't think Cruz is going to be able to just rely on his wrestling like he has before against Johnson and Jorgensen too. Dillashaw nearly took the back and choked out Rafael Sunsao in the first round in their fight, and he did that early in his career to Weil Watson. Dillashaw's a strong scrambler, can take the back standing. I don't think Cruz is just going to be able to dominate him. Cruz, I do think, is more technical on the feet. I think he can use angles better. I think he has more of an enigmatic style, better footwork, and I do think he can score points on Dillashaw, win some rounds early, hit a takedown here and there. But I just think Dillashaw's power is going to make the difference later in the fight. I don't think this is going to look like Browne, Dillashaw, either 1 or 2, where Dillashaw just overwhelms him and picks him apart slowly over the fight and finishes him late. But I do think that power will start to take a toll on Cruz late. Dillashaw, his punches are just more dangerous than Cruz's. That's just undebatable. So I have to go with Dillashaw for a decision. I think it's going to go all 5 rounds. Cruz, again, I think is more technical. Dillashaw has really developed his own technical style, his great footwork himself. He's still a little bit hittable. Saw that in the Joe Soto fight. And we saw that in his last fight against Browne. He's still a little hittable early. I think Dillashaw has the better jab, better combinations. I think he's going to lose some rounds early, but as the fight goes on, I just think his punches do more damage. That's going to sting Cruz a bit in the later rounds, and Dillashaw will come out on top. And also remember, Cruz got dropped a couple of times by Faber in their fight, and if we're going to compare Faber even back then, that version of Faber to what Dillashaw is now, Dillashaw is just way more technical and way more skilled on the feet. So we've seen Cruz struggle on the feet before. It's not like he's never been hit, never been dropped. And for him to go to Mitsugaki, from Mitsugaki to Dillashaw, and still kind of I'll say recovering from that layoff, I think it's going to be a big challenge. And Dillashaw is just more dangerous with his strike. So I'm going with Dillashaw for the decision. And that's it. Those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 81, Dillashaw versus Cruz. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, and I'll be back very soon with my predictions for UFC on Fox, Johnson versus Bader. Take care, you guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.